Thank you.
I need glasses.
Good morning, everybody. Hello. Please sit down. Good morning. Welcome everybody to this session. I would like to put the PowerPoint on the screen already, please. This session is dedicated to the EU, the European Union, actions on improving employment of persons with disabilities. And I have here 4 panelists with me. My name is Monika Chaba. I represent European Commission, a Directorate for Employment and Social Affairs. And we have 4 panelists here. They will introduce themselves later on. However, I just wanted to very briefly introduce them. First of all, we have Nadia Hadad. She is the Executive Committee member of the European Disability Forum, a very important partner for the European Commission in the disability policy framework. We have Tom Rüütel. He is the employer counselor from Estonian Unemployment Insurance Fund. We have Laura Jones. She is the independent researcher. She worked with the European Commission on the development of the disability employment package. So again, a very important partner for us. And finally, we have Brigitte van Lierop. She's the director of This Work Netherlands. She was participating in an EU-funded project on how to improve inclusive employment in small and medium-sized enterprises. So let me just see it works. So we have almost 1 hour session, a little bit less time now. And in this session, we will be presenting, as I've mentioned, what the European Union does to improve employment of persons with disabilities. We'll talk about barriers, we'll talk about solutions, we'll talk about who are the actors, but very importantly, we'll be presenting different perspectives. So on one hand, we focus on all stages of employment, from recruitment, from assessment to employment, to coming back to work, to transition to the open labor market, but we will also be presenting different perspectives, starting from the perspective of persons with disabilities, governmental perspective of employers and social service providers, and then something more broader referring to approaches. And the session will run in a way that I will first set a context. So I'll be presenting what we see on the EU level, how is the situation and what we are doing. Then each of the panelists will have 3 minutes to introduce what they do. Then we will focus on specific questions regarding the different phases of employment and different perspectives. And then hopefully we'll have time for questions. So please think about your questions. We'll open the floor afterwards. So let me start with what we see at the European level. So we in the European Commission, we're very committed to employment generally to well-being of persons with disabilities, including employment. I personally deal with employment of persons with disabilities, so this is my very sort of narrow perspective. And the prevalence of disabilities is very, very high. So there are about 100 million of persons with disabilities in the EU, and there are 48 million of persons with disabilities of working age. This means that there are about 20% of persons with disabilities of working age. Yet, there are only about 50% of persons with disabilities who are in employment in the EU. Moreover, there are about 40% who are inactive, which means they are not even registered with public employment services to look for their job. And the graph you see on the left side is the graph presenting the disability employment gap, which is the gap in employment between persons with and without disabilities, and it looks on a decade. You don't need really to see the to see it very clearly. You see the flat line, and that's what we see. This means the situation has not really improved significantly. So that's why when we are putting together the strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities, which is our policy framework document focusing comprehensively on all areas of life of persons with disabilities, we decided to include disability employment package as one of the 7 flagship initiatives. The flagship initiatives are the most important initiatives of the strategy. What is disability employment package? This is not a typical EU deliverable, meaning it's not a directive, it's not a recommendation. What we try to do is have a sort of a guide and a knowledge hub that would explain the legal obligations, that would explain the policy framework, but that would provide guidance and model practices to employers associations, to public authorities, to services provided across Europe. And the package, as I've mentioned, covered the whole cycle of employment. So from assessment, through recruitment, through staying in employment, return to work. And what you can see, the graph at the left part of the presentation is showing you the different deliverables of the package. So, as I've mentioned, we have the guidelines on recruitment, on hiring, on reasonable accommodation, retention of persons with disabilities in employment, and return to work. But we also focus on alternative employment models. This is something that this conference has focused a lot, because this includes also sheltered employment. So here I wanted to very briefly show you the different deliverables. We've designed them together with various stakeholders across Europe. We set up a platform that brings these stakeholders together, and by stakeholders I mean the governments, the public authorities, the experts on EU level, on national level, the persons with disabilities themselves, the civil society, but also social partners. So we've worked with employers and we've worked with trade unions. We feel it's very important to have them on board. And on the top of my slide, you see different deliverables. These are the guidance. They are all available. If you simply can Google it, disability employment package, you will find all of them. So there is a manual for employment services that also focuses on HR strategies that should be implemented in employment services. You have a guidance on adult learning. You have guidance there on, you have a catalog of positive practices on hiring, which includes over 40 examples of positive practices from across Europe. And then you have guidance on reasonable accommodation, explaining the legal obligation, the Employment Equality Directive obligation. Then there are guidelines on working with chronic diseases, meaning, and disabilities, meaning staying at work, the guidelines on return to work, and the guidelines on reasonable accommodation. And with that, I will end, and I will give the floor to Tom to talk about governmental perspective. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Monika, and hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. So I speak about workability reform that took place in 2016 in Estonia. And idea of this reform was to create a new workability support system. The aim of the changes was to change attitudes towards people with reduced ability to work and to help them to find and keep work. The assessment is measuring what person is capable of and how difficult it is, not what person can do and why this person can't do. The Estonian Unemployment Insurance Fund provides various services for people with reduced workability, like employers counseling service. I am one of the counselor, and my topic is, of course, as you see, movement issues. Then we have a person who deals with mental health problems. Then we have a person who deals with hearing problems. And the other topics we can't provide ourselves, we procure. So basically, there can be any topics, any health issues, what employer is a little bit like afraid of. Then we have work required special aids and workplace adaptation. Then we provide working with a support person service and wage subsidy. So yes, this is what we provide from Estonian Unemployment Service Fund. And yeah, right now that's all.
Thank you very much. And then we move to Laura Jones to look at the practitioner's perspective.
Good morning, everybody. So as Monika introduced me, I'm an independent researcher, and I was working with the European Commission, particularly on 2 of the employment package deliverables. And could we have the next slide? So my presentation will focus a bit on what's in the resources for employers and also for service providers that support people with disabilities and that supports employers. So the practitioner toolkit on strengthening public employment services. Again, Monika mentioned that this is designed to help public employment services better support people with disabilities. And this resource covers, as you can see here, really the whole range of stages of employment. And even though it's targeted at public employment services, it's also relevant for any service provider who might be supporting people with disability. There are things that they can learn also from that resource. The lifelong guidance for persons with disabilities is a briefing note that focuses mainly on career guidance and assessment. Again, it's aimed at public employment services, but also again relevant for service providers who want to have more inspiration about how they can best support people with disabilities in the early phases. And it also talks about recruitment and retention of people with disabilities in work. The Manual for the Management of Chronic Diseases and Preventing the Risk of Acquiring Disabilities, as you can imagine, it focuses on retention and return to work, and this was one of the initiatives that I was leading the development of, so I know this one pretty well. And then we have the Guidelines for Effective Vocational Rehabilitation Schemes, assessment focus, and a return to work focus. So all of these initiatives aim to have really practical guidelines, practical examples, both from the perspective of practice, so services or support, as well as having policy guidance for governments. So we make recommendations in some of these documents as well. They showcase good practices for policymakers. And there is some overlap in the content, of course, but overall, there's a really wide range of resources and interesting content available for you, so I really encourage you to check those out. As I said, I'm going to focus on how these resources support service providers and employers working with people with disabilities. And I take the approach of, okay, what challenges do these initiatives address? What questions do employers have or service providers have that these initiatives can answer? So kind of starting from a pre-employment phase about education. So this is particularly in the vocational rehabilitation guidelines. We look at how can vocational education and training providers, both specialists and mainstream, create an inclusive learning experience for all learners. An essential element of any personal development is the co-produced individual plan for the learner, for the employee, whatever stage they are at. So we look at how can we ensure effective co-produced plans for personal development, returning to work or staying in work. Of course, what support can help people with a disability or chronic disease to get and keep a job. How could services be enhanced to better support individuals and employers? How can work and the workplace be adapted for someone with a disability or a chronic disease? Where can we find different resources? How can I, as an employer, build an inclusive, safe and healthy work environment for everybody? And then some points about what benefits can vocational rehabilitation support and services offer employers. So that's what I'm going to come back to later.
Thank you very much, Laura. And now we move to a very important perspective, the most important perspective of persons with disabilities. Nadia.
Thank you. Well, good morning, all of you. Thank you for the organizers for having us. So the European Disability Forum is an umbrella organization defending the right of more than 1 million persons with disability at Europe and all member states of the Council of Europe. So we are an organization run really by persons with disability themselves, and we are using always the CRPD, so the Convention on the Right of Persons with Disability, especially General Comment 7 of it. So we recently have done a review to be sure that all our members and our member organizations are led by persons with disabilities. So we are part of the European Union Disability Platform. They have a subgroup that work on employment, and we give them input on the employment package, so we collaborate with them on this. And we have really particular focus on reasonable accommodation, as we have diverse disabilities present within our member organizations, so we think that we are the ones who know what kind of accommodations we need. And we focus also on the transition from shelter workshops to the regular market. You can go to the next slide, please. So, because for us it's really important, like I said, as we are following the convention, that the paradigm shift should be there and that the transition is really needed. The transition is needed, but in good conditions, so that people don't want to go back. So we need also to focus on to raise the skills of persons with disabilities, so in order that they are ready and that they have the capacity to work in the regular market. And also there must be a kind of paradigm shift that in the community and in the workplaces, in the regular market where people are going, that there was an openness and that they are able also to work on equal level as us, if they have the right support, if they have the right condition, and if they went through qualitative education before they came to the labor market, because that's also a very big problem. So we think that if we want also one of the flagships of the European strategy is independent living, we find that employment is a pillar of independent living, and without it it's impossible to go. Why? Because it provides economic independence, it gives us choice and control over our lives and social connections within work, and also it works on our identity, because it's not normal that in 2025 still small buses come and pick up a group of people and bring them to segregated setting and let them work. So that's the focus, and I will elaborate a little bit more on this later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, in this short introduction, we move to Brigitte van Lierop. And before I give her the floor, I wanted to say that the European Union is not only focused on policy making, but we also fund it. So not only we have the well-known European Social Fund, but we have a European Social and Employment Innovation Program. And this program is used to fund innovative solutions that very often stakeholders do not have the money, and these are small stakeholders. This could be, for example, a city council or a smaller one operating on local, on regional level, and they want to test a solution, and they wouldn't have the money coming from the public budget for this kind of experimentation, and we do fund it. And one of the funded projects was the one focusing on small and medium-sized enterprises who face a lot of problems in inclusive employment. We know it's much easier for a big corporation with their policies. It's much more difficult. So I'm extremely proud of this project, and that's why I invited them to join this session. Brigitte, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Monika, and thank you that I was invited for this session. I would like to start with a story. I would like to tell you the story of James. James owns a busy garage in northern Germany. Every day cars roll in non-stop, but he struggles to find enough mechanics to keep up with the demands. His team is overworked, his job vacancies get no responses, and he has no idea how to fix the problem. He's a small and medium-sized enterprise. Then one morning, his friend William, a fellow entrepreneur, invites him to a breakfast meeting with other business owners in their village. It's an informal gathering, a chance to share experiences and ideas. James decides to go, though he doesn't expect too much. As he's drinking his coffee, one of William's employees stands up to introduce himself. He speaks proudly about his work, and William chimes in, praising his contribution to the business. Then James learns something surprising. The employee has a disability, but that doesn't seem to matter at all. He's doing an excellent job, and William is more than happy with him. William then turns to the group of fellow entrepreneurs. Have you ever considered hiring somebody with a disability? He asks. James shakes his head. That would never work in a garage, he thinks. But then William explains something about inclusive job design. Businesses can be restructured and tasks can be rearranged, letting highly skilled workers focus on their core responsibilities while handing off repetitive or logistical work to somebody else. James immediately thinks about all the small but time-consuming tasks that mechanics handle, organizing tools, restocking supplies. What if someone else could take over? His team could focus on repairs, and he could reduce some of the pressure they feel every day. Even better, hiring somebody for these tasks would be much more cost-effective than bringing in a fully trained mechanic. Intrigued, James asks where to start. William introduces him to a service provider who helps businesses connect with potential employees. Before long, James hires his first employee with a disability. The new hire is thrilled to have a job, James' mechanics are relieved, and James himself is more than satisfied. It's a true win-win situation. Next slide. In this short story, some solutions are included that we, as a consortium of partners from 8 countries, have been researching over the past 2 years. With big support from the European Commission, we were working to understand what it takes for small and medium-sized enterprises to become more inclusive. What convinces employers? What are their concerns? And most importantly, how can we help them open their doors to employees with a disability? One of the most effective strategies we found is peer influence. Employers trust other employers more than they trust service providers or public service providers. That's why stories like James are so powerful. So in addition to the already available employment package of the DG Employment, and to give some extra support to small and medium-sized enterprises, we have created a package full of resources with lots of storytellings, real-life video, employer stories, instructional videos for employers, and action guidelines with a structured 12-step approach to running effective events that motivate SMEs to hire persons with a disability. So let's work together to make SMEs more inclusive by using the right strategies, sharing the right stories, and offering the right tools.
Thank you very much, Brigitte. So it was an introduction a little bit longer than we have planned. So if I can ask the panelists to maybe be a little bit shorter now in your second intervention to allow for a discussion with the audience, it would be great. And what I would like now to move back to Tom to answer the question, to come back to workability reform and answer the question, how can we make the assessment process more effective to help persons with disabilities move from inactivity to employment?
Thank you very much. I try to be faster and shorter. So, in the assessment process, it is important to view a person as a unified system. What are their strengths, education, skills, physical and mental capabilities, family support, and etc. The work capacity assessment process used in Estonia evaluates the abilities that individuals already have, rather than what they lack. Flexibility may not always be beneficial, as making changes in life can be difficult. can be difficult and leading to procrastination. In Estonia, the Unemployment Insurance Fund provides support so that the individuals with reduced work capacity who are capable of working can find suitable and enjoyable employment through active labor market measures. That means everybody who wants to work need to work on the place where they, what they have studied, where they want, what they are capable of, not on the place where a system tells you you need to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your very short intervention and up to the point. And I wanted to move to the employers and service providers perspective again. Laura, can you tell us what, in your view, are key challenges for employers to recruit and retain persons with disabilities, and what can we learn from the package? How can the package guidelines be helpful?
So one initial challenge is actually finding well-educated and people with the right skills. There has been a history of people with disabilities not being able to access good quality education and training. So it's very important to start early in the process of a person's life cycle and ensure inclusive learning environments. As I mentioned before, and it's important for education organizations to have inclusive organizational cultures, ensure teachers are well trained and empowered, and the education and training, of course, meets the labor market needs, because this is also a challenge we've seen, that people are not being trained for the right areas of work, or they do not have the right maybe soft or social skills for the workplace as well. So it's really important to look into that. Then there's maybe been a challenge in being able to support people with very different needs. Of course, every individual is different, so it's essential to take an individual approach to supporting somebody to enter the labor market, to stay in the labor market. Tom already talked about the holistic approach to supporting people. This is important also in personal planning, that you really need to look at somebody's whole life context. And when supporting somebody to go back into the labor market, to take a step-by-step approach, to have a very clear plan with goals, etc. And also to ensure that people are motivated and enthusiastic for changes that they might need to go through in order to adjust workplaces. And in that sense also, challenge can be understanding how workplaces can be adjusted, how jobs could be adjusted, or maybe employers think, oh, workplace adjustments, that's very expensive, it's a lot of technology, but actually there are many small things employers can do to make sure workplaces are accessible for everybody. You know, it's not just about physical adaptations, but it's about work time, work flexibility, etc. So it's important that employers can understand that it's often not as difficult as they might think. There's a lot of resources in the different publications about how workplaces and working can be adapted for people with different challenges, different disabilities and chronic diseases. Then also from a service provider perspective, it's important that they take an approach where they're supporting both the individual with a disability and, of course, the employers to address their needs and concerns. And wide collaboration is essential with all stakeholders, developing the personal plan, but also throughout their working life as well. Then maybe just a few comments on challenges of building an inclusive work environment for everybody. Again, this might seem like a daunting task. There are a lot of resources, particularly in the Management of Chronic Diseases manual. It's really important to build trust with employees and engage them in discussions around inclusive workplaces, safe workplaces, around risk. And also it's important to create a positive atmosphere in terms of mental well-being. So in the Manual for the Management of Chronic Diseases and Prevention of Disabilities, there are quite a lot of resources about having a positive mental health in the workplace. So there's also a section on how to support people with psychosocial challenges in the workplace. We also look at how to support people with cancer, cardiovascular diseases, musculoskeletal disorders, and long COVID. So I really encourage you to check those out. So not just if you're an employer, but if you're a person with a disability, you might find something in there where you can say, okay, I could introduce that to my employer. Maybe they're not aware of these resources or this approach. And then service providers can hopefully find inspiration in there. And then just maybe some last notes on benefits of vocational rehabilitation. There are many actors also from that sector here. We developed this resource in close collaboration with the European Platform for Rehabilitation with service providers who are working in this sector. And in the document, we also tried to show the business case for vocational rehabilitation. Why should they look for support services to help their employees? And it shows a bit like some studies where the cost-benefit analysis has shown the impact from a financial perspective employers for reaching out and getting support for their employees, and showing how different support services can bring in expertise to support individuals and provide resources to support the employer in general in being a more inclusive workplace. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Laura. Great presentation. And what I wanted to add that indeed in all the guidelines that we have produced, we try to dispel a lot of myths that exist. And I think it's very useful for every single stakeholder. So please, I invite you to have a look. If you need some examples, you'll find them there. And now I would like to move again to perspective of persons with disabilities. Nadia, if you can tell us what persons with disabilities really need in all stages. And by all stages, I mean the assessment, recruitment, staying at work, and return to work.
I think what's really very important is that there are the possibility to have reasonable accommodations already when starting to interview. And even when a vacancy is open, the way the communication is done, it should be accessible, it should be adaptable so that everybody, regardless the kind of disability he has, can read that call. And then also when they go to an interview, that reasonable accommodation are taken into account and that they are considerate. And also that within the team where the person is going to work, that there is a training for the staff about the disability there is, in collaboration with the person with disability himself or other representative organizations of persons with disabilities. So we really find there's a big lack of that reasonable accommodations, and also the fact that sometimes an employer thinks that once they provided a bigger screen or they provided some basic material, that's enough. No, our needs can change by years. So there must be also that openness to change it. And in some countries, there is some subventions, there are allowances for employers to get refunded. In some countries, there's also an allowance if you hire somebody with disability about, they say, the kind of perks of performance of the person with disability themselves. But the biggest problems that we find that is in the majority of the countries, there is no intervention for person assistant to accompany the person with a disability during the day. So mainly that's a very big barrier. And then also we have other things like transport, like also the housing, if it's far from the place where the people need to home, the assistive technology, the cost of it also, and yeah, a lot of other things that are not taken into consideration directly from the beginning.
Thank you very much, Nadia, and thanks for mentioning the definition of, a little bit going into the definition of reasonable accommodation. In our guidelines, we explain what is and what is not reasonable accommodation, because indeed it's very often the case that employer thinks, okay, I'll do something, and it's very often an ad hoc measure out of, I don't know, goodwill. We do explain, so all of you who would like to learn more, please have a look into the guidelines. And finally, I give the floor to Brigitte with a question on whether all employers face the same challenges. and how to seduce employers. Brigitte will present a different perspective, and also you will be able to see a short video afterwards.
Thank you. Yeah, there is a difference between large companies and small and medium-sized enterprises. As we heard yesterday, large companies often have everything in place. They have the HR policies, etc., and structured diversity policies. But if you look at the SMEs, they sort of face three challenges. First is the budget constraint. They don't have money for reasonable accommodation, although that's not the case, as we know. And then there is the lack of knowledge. Business owners often don't know the benefits of hiring a person with a disability, and you don't know where to find them. So, and what we also see is they have a sort of informal recruitment, and in that case meaning unintentionally excluding people with a disability in their vacancies. So that's a big of a problem. As a result, the SME business owners hesitate to take this first step towards inclusion. And this is why our ISME project in Europe comes in. So how do we open that door? How can we seduce employers to open the door and listen to what the possibilities are in their company? So we studied business owners' mindset, and we looked at all theories of behavior change, and we combined them, and we learned that tailor-made approaches are key. For instance, if you offer a subsidy to an employer who's not at all interested, it doesn't work. They don't listen to you even. So, and on the other side, practical guidance will work, because if they are interested to hire somebody, they need the practical guidance. So in addition to what was already made in general for all employers, we specifically targeted on SMEs to make materials from a business owner's perspective. So all these materials focus on what truly matters for them, that is the productivity, the business benefits, and the reputation. So, and we made videos, also short trigger videos, and I would like to show you now one short video how inclusion makes business sense. Can the video start?
When you give someone a chance who might not otherwise have had that opportunity, they will be loyal, committed, reliable, and forever make a difference in your organization.
The loyalty of people from the target group is very high. Once they have found a place where they feel at home, they will rarely, if ever, leave. They are loyal to the company. They are also very grateful to you.
We have filled our job vacancy, which is great, of course, and with an employee who is incredibly loyal and is productive, so I think we couldn't ask for more added value.
Well, from a business perspective, it definitely increases revenue. Without revenue or any form of profit, it's unsustainable. So it has increased my revenue. It has broadened my view.
That you may have to take more time, but in the end, if you invest this time in it, it pays off double.
And it has given peace of mind to other colleagues because the work can be shared.
As we are an inclusive organization, and we can demonstrate that in the market, clients are inclined to choose us because the market is changing and inclusivity is encouraged throughout the supply chain.
We started with 1 employee from the target group. By now, we have 10, and many more will follow. For us, it is very rewarding.
Yes, fellow entrepreneurs, you too can become an inclusive organization. I would say, take off your blinkers if you have them on and start the conversation.
Thank you so much. How many videos like that we have available, Brigitte?
About 30 videos that have real-life stories of successful employers. And for each country, there are trigger videos, also like this one.
They are all available for you to use, to inspire yourself, and to play to whoever you need to play them. Now we have about 15 minutes, I believe good 15 minutes, or maybe a little bit less for questions for our panelists. Are there any questions? please. If you could introduce yourself, it would be great. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sam. I work for an employers federation in Flanders, Belgium. I bundled my questions, but they're small ones. One, we have a very largely SME-dominated economy in Flanders, and our experience is that the integration of people with disabilities in the SME companies is more sustainable compared to large companies. These small business employers would often go above and beyond in trying to keep people on board, which is something we often do not see in large firms. So I was a bit surprised about this claim of the challenges of SMEs. So this is, well, the question is like, is this a data-driven thing? Because we do not see this in my economic landscape. Then one question, this was shortly touched upon by you, but what we see, one of the main challenges in employment, and employment drives, as you said, independent living, independence in general, but is mobility. The first challenge people face is getting to work. And for a lot of people, the early stages of employment are often unpaid internships. If people have to pay on top of this to get to work while they are not paid, this is a large gap to bridge. Has this been taken into account in these employment packages? And then the last one was to you, sir. Seeing that on the topic of assessment, you spoke about a holistic way of assessment. What we've been noticing is that a more granular approach to assessment has positive outcomes, since this very granular approach makes that you can rearrange these sub-competences into new tasks, which makes for a more flexible profile towards new economic activities. So I would like to hear your take on this. Lastly, what we see, and I've not heard any of you speak about this, is the gap between, if we're talking about assessment of skills and competences, the gap between the language used in schools, the language used by public employment services in their assessment of somebody's gap to the open labor market and the benefits they give based on this, and the language used in employers, like their competency frameworks. These are three often very different sets of language, which are very hard to compare again, especially when the government comes to evaluate the employment and see if more active measures or financial measures are needed. What's your take on this?
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Please go ahead.
My name is Maria. I'm a Parents Network coordinator, and my question is about public policy initiatives. Are there public policies you would welcome or support? We hear a lot about ESG ranking and tax cuts. Is there anything else that we as a society and stakeholders can support?
Any other questions? Please go ahead.
Yes, my name is Amira and I work for GIZ Egypt. First, thank you very much for the very interesting insights. I have two questions. So the first one is, it would be interesting to know if companies already started adopting the guidelines. Did anyone start using them? Are they at an early stage, or do we have some results already that it could be interesting to know as well? And another question to you, Laura, on like the research process itself. So the outcomes and everything that was the result of this research is very clear, but also maybe a bit of challenges along the way. Did you find it easy to extract or to reach this position? What were the challenges? And also maybe if there are interesting processes, tools, etc., it would be also very good to hear about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think these are all the questions we will be able to take. And I asked my panelists very kindly to please be as short as possible on the answers so we can answer all the extremely interesting questions. And thank you very much for these questions. And I suggest we start with in fact, the first questions on Flanders, so the 4 questions, but maybe some of them on Flanders, on the SME-dominated economy. The question was about sustainability of integration of persons with disabilities in SMEs. And I think, yeah, I'll ask Brigitte to answer it.
Yeah, I completely agree. We see indeed in SMEs, people stay much longer. But the thing is, we have, I don't know how many in Flanders, but in the Netherlands we have about 75,000 SMEs. And not all of them have already persons with a disability working for them. So you're right, once they're in, they stay. But there's a lot of employers there that need to open their door. So this is why we have developed the guidelines.
And then there was a question on getting to work, so that the mobility issue. Maybe before I give the floor to the panelists, I wanted to say, as at the beginning I said I only deal with employment, so I developed the disability employment package, but the strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities focuses comprehensively on all areas of life. So we have other flagship initiatives, including on independent living, including the European Disability Card, a lot of others. I invite you to also have a look into the strategy. But I wanted to give on this the floor to Tom and then to Nadia, please.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I try to be as quick as I can. So, yes, for you, sir, in our assessment, we looked the strength of this person, and our organization helped to find a job what is related to strengths of this person. And second question, of course, education is the key to find a job. And the main problem is how do we get out of our homes. But I want to say that if we hide behind these obstacles and we don't speak with our local governments that we want to go out, that we don't have adapted homes, then nothing happens. And the second point is, it is very good to study, but some persons, they are studying forever. So after studies, there must be a will to go to work, and workplace can be adapted. So after studies, if there is no first step towards to job, nothing happens. Thank you.
And I would like also Nadia to answer this question, and any other you felt you would like to answer, please go ahead.
Yes, it's just about, but it's about what we do at European level now when we say fund training programs for young people with disability to facilitate their transition to the open labor market. And it's really also, we are asking to abolish unpaid internship. If you want a qualitative and if you want to give really a chance to young person with a disability, then transport need to be paid and the internship need to be paid, because it's a workforce that come in. We have that with, for example, the youth guarantee that permits people to, young people to be paid. So we want to include this also for persons with disabilities. If they do any internship or training, that all the costs are covered and that they are paid to do a decent work, so that they can use to the languages, the different languages during this period. And also we also encourage very much that we train a person beforehand, before he starts the job, because bringing people into the place and then starting to train him, to adapt him, that takes much more time. And also we saw from results that many people just abandon it because they feel like they don't fit into the plate that was supposed to do for them. There was no flexibility, they really had one kind of person in mind that comes and do the job. So if there's somebody doesn't fit in, then so it's giving somehow a chance, but not an equal opportunity. And there it's leaking.
Yeah, just one second. Thank you very much, Nadia. I wanted to come back now to Laura on the research process and the challenges, and also I wanted to give you the two most difficult questions. And I know Brigitte wants to chip in, so I give you the floor afterwards on the holistic assessment versus granular assessment and different languages.
Yeah, just to explain a bit how we developed the two initiatives that I was involved in, which is very similar to the other, at least two of the other publications as well. So they were really developed in collaboration with the Disability Platform, which is the EU level main stakeholder group of governments, so government departments, people working in government on disability policy, and the key NGOs active at European level. So myself and the other researchers, we presented our concept to this group, and we had feedback, and then we had various stages of feedback with this group. The starting point, the framework, let's say, was existing researches that the EU has gathered mainly under the remit of the European Agency for Safety and Health at Work. But we also were able to complement that with our own desk research, with interviews with some of the stakeholders and gathering of good practices, both directly with government representatives and with, for example, service providers. One challenge was making sure that everything, that the documents were relevant for all the stakeholders, to have concrete and interesting content for everybody, and also maybe managing the different slightly different perspectives, for example, when it comes to also trade unions and employers associations. We wanted to make sure that it was obviously disability inclusive and just, yeah, working with all the different stakeholders, but we didn't find any big challenges in producing these documents that are both practical and policy-oriented, I would say.
Holistic versus granular assessment.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure I understood the question, sorry.
So, but I'm afraid
but we may be running out of time.
Yes, we're running out of time. So then there is a break. So I believe you could discuss, Brigitte, on the languages. Please go ahead.
Yes, and again, Flanders, you're right. It's a big problem. The language that is used in schools, the language that is schooled by vocational rehabilitation centers, and the language schools that is used by employers. There are solutions already for that. Yeah, we know that one of the big problems if you organize a matching digital site, that there's 2 languages, even 3 languages. So, but we found solutions for that. There are already systems working to bring it together to one language so that you can really match the capacities and the job requirements. That's already there, but we can talk about that later. And then about the assessment, it was about the holistic approach. We have
the granular.
Yeah.
Does she have?
No.
No, but I believe there are other people perhaps waiting for the room, and I've been told very strongly we need to finish. So I propose that we move the questions to the breaks. I wanted to answer very quickly the question on the state of play of the guidelines. We've just finalized the package. We are in the process of dissemination. I ask all of you to help us disseminate. This would be great. And then on the Parents Network, we always look for input. The disability platform is one way. We will have another call in 2026 to join the platform. So please do stay in touch with us. And I wanted to thank you so much for all the panelists for preparing this session with me. We've worked very hard on preparation. I want to thank Nadia, Tom, Laura, and Brigitte. And as I said, we are available, so please take opportunity to grab the speakers and ask them the questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Monika.
I have to speak to Brigitte. I have to speak with Brigitte.